Welcome to Syntax. We got a Potluck episode for you today, which is you bring the questions, we bring the answers. Keep the questions coming, folks. Go to syntax.fm. In the bar, there's a hyperlink you can click on, and you can give us your question. We'll answer it in an upcoming episode. Today, we got some really good questions on should every developer be a full stack developer? A lot of people are frustrated that all the job postings want you to do absolutely everything. How should you review a pull request? What does that even look like? Migrating a large PHP app. What is the use of the CSS attr function? So it just landed in Chrome. You can use it on all the HTML elements. What is possibly the use for that? And then some VS Code tricks. Some really good questions today. Let's get on into it. First question we have here from Big Dave. When is the appropriate time to use requestAnimationFrame, and does it differ in React, Svelte, Angular? Yeah, this is a cool question. RequestAnimationFrame is a function in JavaScript that essentially allows you to queue up some work that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And very likely that has to do with updating the DOM or something that will cause a repaint on the page. So I'll use this if I'm trying to draw something to the page, or if you're trying to use a canvas and you're trying to update the canvas as often as you want. Now, normally you would think, okay, well, I want to run this thing. Like maybe some monitors are 30 frames a second, some monitors are 60 frames a second, and some monitors are 120 frames a second. And then you have to think about like computation as well, meaning that like maybe you can't run that as often as you want because it's computationally expensive, and maybe you're only going to get 20 frames out of there. So there's this like problem with the browser is like, how often do I run this updater function? And instead of having to figure any of that out, you simply just run requestAnimationFrame, meaning that you say, hey, browser, I would like to paint this. When you are next able to paint, please go ahead and run this function to update the canvas or to rotate an item a certain amount and so on. So it's pretty nice because you don't really have to figure out how frequently you want to run something. You just ask the browser and it's going to figure it out for you. And people that have 120 hertz displays that are running on super powerful machines are going to get as fast as possible. And other people who may not necessarily have that refresh rate or CPU power are going to get a little bit left. So the question of when is the appropriate time to use RequestAnimationFrame, essentially, any time that you want to run something as frequently as possible without having to bog down the UI and how to overload the processing in there. Does it matter between React, Svelte, Angular? No, this is a lower level JavaScript API, and it doesn't really matter. I did have somebody once on Twitter say that they would try to throttle their RequestAnimationFrame to not run too often. And I was like, huh, interesting. But then everybody came out and be like, nah, that's kind of a moot optimization, you know? Yeah. Like, I don't think you should we really be doing that. One thing I'll have to also say about RequestAnimationFrame is if you're doing animation with RequestAnimationFrame, you must use the time that is passed into it. So when you start an animation, RequestAnimationFrame might not be called every 60 frames a second, 1,000 milliseconds, every 16. Might not be called every 16 milliseconds if you're trying to shoot for 60 frames a second. So what can happen there is sometimes you're on a website and the animations run way faster, or they run choppy, meaning that they're like, if you're rotating it like a degree every single time that this runs, it might run way faster or way slower, or is at a choppy amount than you think it will. So you'll have to actually run based on when you started the animation and based on how far you are given time, not amount of times that this function has run. That's how you figure out the degree that you rotate something to, or how far along the screen it is.
Yeah, lovely explanation. RequestAnimationFrame, I remember when it showed up, one of those things that makes our lives a little bit easier.
Way easier. Yeah. Just, it's good.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw the syntax for it being like, so what exactly? How do you use this? For some reason it didn't speak to me immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, because the last thing you do at the end of a request animation frame is you request an animation
Right.
frame again, right? And then basically you call it infinitely until you have a break or exit condition.
Yeah. All right, next one from Mike W. Just found your show 4 to 5 months ago. Hey, welcome, Mike. It's been going for a little bit, so happy to have you. I have absolutely been loving you guys' Canadian podcast. Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mike W. He's from BC. Good.
I'm from BC, and Scott Svelte represent. CJ, your video content is amazing. Oddly enough, two of the three of those are Rocky Mountain folks. My question is, how do you guys handle code reviews? I've been working on larger teams recently. They aren't huge by any stretch, just larger than the 1 to 2 man show that I'm used to. I haven't really found a great groove yet to where and how to do good and meaningful code reviews. GitHub Web can be super slow. I tried Git Kraken and VS Code, but nothing feels right for me. Can you guys offer any alternative tool suggestions or maybe just some pro tips or advice on how you do them? Yeah, I've never used an app for this specifically. There are other apps like Git clients, like Git Tower is one that has been relatively around for a while. Now, I don't know how well this works specifically for code reviews. I just know that that's a Git client that people like, the official GitHub client as well. As far as code reviews go, your process around code reviews, I think, will differ from person to person. I am not going to lie. My attention to detail and my just general nature has always made code reviews a bit of a challenge for me, because I can look at it all, I can test it all, I can try it all, I can go through it, and it all seems fine, and I might miss something. So for me, the tools have always been the biggest thing to help with some of that. If we're talking like code quality stuff, if we're talking specific code style things, like if your company has a code style that things need to adhere to, you shouldn't have to put that onto the person doing the code review to find those things. Those things should be found with a tool, whether that is like linting or any of those things. So just my standpoint there is to automate as much of that stuff as possible. And granted, there are things you'll want to look for and have a good eye for, but in larger teams where you're probably spending a decent amount of time doing code reviews because, right, people are shipping stuff, people are writing code. Multiple people have different coding styles. I think your process in general is something you'll want to sit down and like really try to formalize. Now, granted, I don't know if this is, non-obvious advice here. Automate what you can automate, formalize your process. The app, I think, is less important. I've personally just always used GitHub for this. Wes, I think you just use GitHub, and CJ does as well. So
I'll tell you what I use in just a sec once you're done, because I've got some thoughts here.
Okay. Well, you give me your thoughts right now. Let's have a conflab.
Let me share my screen here. I use GitHub pull requests. It's a VS Code extension.
So you use that for code reviews. Okay.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll open up the GitHub pull request extension, and it will list all of your open pull requests. So here is an absolute monster of a pull request that I've put in to convert every single MP3 URL from our old host to our new host. And I asked in the chat if anybody would help me review it, just to obviously you can't go through every single one, or you could write a script, but just to give it a quick look over. Nobody so far has helped me out. So, dear listener, I have the same problems as you. My poor teammates are not reviewing my code.
I was on vacation, by the way. Actually, I wasn't on vacation. I was on a work trip.
So That's fine.
Yes, I was on a work trip.
I'll allow it. But basically, my process is like this, right? So I'll open up the pull requests, and you just basically go through each of the changes. And as you're done, you can go ahead and check them off as seen. You can also add a little comment on it, being like, this sucks, and I feel like this is a much more comfortable UI, because this is where I'm writing my code, right? I can make edits to the code myself. I can leave comments on it. I can do suggestions. I can start a review. I think it's a totally separate extension from the source control, the Git integration in VS Code. It's an actual extension from GitHub called GitHub pull requests. And I think it's highly underutilized. I've been trying to force myself into the out of the terminal into like a GUI, because everybody says,
Yeah.
no, you got to use a GUI for this type of stuff. And this is the first thing that's stuck, which is the process of
Checking.
reviewing
Yeah.
pull requests. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My biggest problem is that like when people submit pull requests with a lot of code, to me, I can get bogged down. Like Markdown, sure, or small changes, functions, whatever.
Minus
Those things are
900
easy.
files.
Right. But it's Markdown. You're not like getting into it. But when there's like a big old pull request of several components and large files and all sorts of stuff, I can definitely get bogged down in a little bit of like my eyes glossing over and looks good to me type of thing. So I think it helps to be the type of person who has a really good attention to detail for these types of things. And maybe that's just not me. I think that takes a specific type of brain.
Yeah, one more tip there is you can also stack pull requests. So when you're implementing a feature, often what will happen is you'll think, well, while I'm here, I might as well do this. Or in order to implement this, I need to change how this other feature works, you know? And if you throw in a pull request that has the fix for what you want, the change of how something works, and the like, while I'm here, I might as well go ahead and update the packages and whatnot, then it becomes just like this, like, oh, this is too much, you know? And like ideally, yeah, you'd put in like 3 separate pull requests for those types of things. But what you really want to do is stack them, meaning that you maybe update your dependencies first, open up a pull request for that, but then continue your work on, branch off of that work already.
Yep.
And then you have a second pull request that does the changing how things work, and then a third pull request, which is actually implementing it. And that way, when they're stacked, they're a little bit easier to review. One thing doesn't necessarily break another, and then they're a little easier to view, and you can merge them all in at once, or you can go through them one by one. They're a little bit more manageable that way.
Yeah. I like that, and that is I think that's a problem that can be solved with just like proper education in teams and like not accepting pull requests. That because like if you put like, so if your employee comes to you and is like, here's this pull request with that, right? The quick fix, this and that all in one, and you say, I'm not going to merge this. Please bring these as separate pull requests. The amount of like effort now that puts on that developer to go and fix that. If somebody tasked me with that effort, I would be like, I ain't doing this again. I'm going to do it the right way next time, because that's such a pain now to split that stuff out. So, yeah.
I think this is also a spot that AI will help us significantly, because this is just often it's just grunt work and you're going to miss things. You know, if you're relying on somebody just kind of scanning it and running the tests and whatnot, AI is much better at those monotonous things and possibly catching things that you should then review.
Yeah, totally. Word.
Mike asks, could you give me some realistic examples of when to use the CSS attr function and when that might be useful? Why would a CSS value end up in HTML and HTML's data attribute? Is there a real world use case for that? So he's talking about in CSS now we're able to use attr to be able to access your HTML attributes. And that's really exciting. We've been able to do it in like before and after pseudo elements, which was handy for like tooltips and whatnot. But now you're able to actually access all of the HTML elements attributes
in Chrome.
From is it all of them? Yeah, it's just in Chrome. Is it just data attributes? Or
I think it's just data attributes. I think it's just data attributes. Let's see.
Let's double check that. No, it is. It works.
Oh yeah, non-string values.
Href as well, and that's really handy because you often want to grab the href, the title, the alt, the maybe. Oh, I don't know. It doesn't work with value because, well, you can get value, but it's not updated. Like if you have like an input type of range,
you couldn't do like dynamic.
Yeah, and if the value will be whatever is set as default, but as you scroll it around and change it in JavaScript or in the DOM, it's not reflected, which maybe that will change. That's kind of a cool use case. But let's talk about the real killer feature here. The real killer feature here is declarative UIs, meaning that in order to make your HTML as declarative as possible, you can pass in settings, colors, counts, anything as data attributes or just regular attributes in your HTML. And that's really cool because then you don't have to write some JavaScript to pass those values in. And you don't have to pass them in kind of a weird way, which is using inline style attributes. You can simply just put a attribute on your HTML element, which is, you could pass like color.
Yeah.
You could count like how many items should this be, how many columns. Like imagine a declarative CSS grid. It's such a common thing. I just want a box with 3 columns in it. And you can have like you can throw a class of grid on it, or you can simply just do data-grid calls equals 3, and boom, it'll give you 3 because you can access those values from your CSS. So those are probably the most killer features of just accessing settings. The other one is probably like tooltips, being able to access the URL, the title, the alt text of an actual element.
Yeah, some people, I have an example where people are doing like citing sources and that kind of stuff. I do think once this works well with the upcoming if statements, once it works well with style queries where you can query off of attribute values, what you're essentially doing is adding the features of styled components into CSS, because you're essentially able to pass values into your CSS and then conditionally show or modify CSS with the attribute value. So that is essentially in CSS and JS, when we'd pass a prop into a styled component and then do an if statement in JavaScript inside of our CSS, this is getting very close to that with just straight up CSS. And to me, that seems really, really great. A lot of the things that, like you had mentioned, can be done with classes. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we've been doing for a long time is abusing classes by just adding classes, removing classes, a whole bunch of them left and right. And you're kind of polluting the class thing. And I think most of us have gotten into a situation where we have like button, danger button, button this, button large, or whatever. You have all these different additional classes that could and make more sense to be like props, which attributes can be seen as kind of like props and style it based on that, rather than adding and removing another class here and there. And I think this makes it all a lot cleaner in my mind.
And it wasn't even just adding more classes, but like the way that you do this now is you pop like a style attribute on the element and you say style equals, and then inside of that you can do like dash speed : 300, and that syntax kind of sucks because you're just dumping a big string in there. It's a little bit better in like React world or any of these framework worlds, because you can pass like an object which is style. But like I even imagine this is going to be killer for Tailwind, because for Tailwind to be able to specify both like a property and a value in a Go is going to be great. Imagine you could do like group equals card on an actual element, and then you can access that in other spots of your CSS. And then also with not passing the inline CSS is you're not having like weird specificity issues where you're battling each other with it, because now you have some inline CSS, and so now you have some that is written in your actual CSS. Everything is just in your CSS file, and you can access the data attributes or your regular HTML attributes from there.
Word. All right, next question from Luke Ruokaismaki. I hope that was right, Luke. Sorry. As somebody who has a long ski last name, I get it. Less a question and more a general comment. In episode 911, you mentioned Brave browser briefly. I'm a Brave user, and one of the main reasons that I appreciate that someone is trying to find a solution to the ad problem, like most, I always run an ad blocker, but I'm aware that this hurts sites and companies' income, mostly because they'll tell you obnoxious pop-ups telling you to disable the ad block. Yes. I don't know that Brave's solution with BAT, what is that? It's a basic access token?
No, basic attention token. So their whole idea is that like you can like put money into your Brave, and then based on like content you are consuming, some of those tokens will go to the actual authors, which I was kind of excited about as somebody who writes blog posts and posts videos online in the early days.
I have a decent amount of basic attention token because of YouTube. In the past, I had connected Level Up Tutorials properties to that. And because of that, I was getting a ton of it. The only problem with basic attention token is that it's worth less than dirt. So it's like, if we're talking about like actual ad dollars or anything like that, it is not very much. So, okay. I don't know that Brave's solution with BAT will be the solution or if there's some other integration, but I don't know if there's any problem, a significant attempt to solve this problem. Which leads to the actual question. With more people doing research or just in general reading and planning with AI tools, it seems like there's less of a need to actually visit sites, since the tools can either find, ingest, and summarize the site for you or can take a link to a website and summarize, etc. Do you have any thoughts on if this will become the way most people interact with the browser on the internet, and what would this do for people or companies that rely on ad revenue? Keep up the awesome work. Peace from Australia. This is a great question because I think this is a big topic. I had a lot of conversations about this topic when I was in Amsterdam. And from Tejas' talk, he did a talk on Langflow, but a big portion of his talk was about how UIs are great, but everybody brings their own UI to the table. You got to hunt for things. You got to do all this stuff. And ultimately, the reason why people are going to chatbots is because it gets them an answer faster than going to the UI. And I love UIs. I'm a UI person. But like, what if the UI and the chatbot merge in a way where you can have new UIs that bring you the information from a faster and easier way that's more reliable and maybe more how you're used to accepting it. Now, I love creative UIs. I love creativity. I like art. I like all that stuff. So that's like a big portion of it. Like, how many people are going to replace their general browsing of actual sites? And think about it this way. The first consolidation happened where we used to have web rings. We used to have individual sites. We used to have creative applications on the web. And all those filtered into what? Social media. And social media, you got the few sites that you visit all the time. You got Instagram, you got Twitter, you got Facebook, whatever. These social media sites took up a lot of that personal space that was somebody's own personal space on the web. The personal space is now group spaces. And then so that shift to that changed a lot of that landscape as well in terms of the UIs that we're using. And I do think that this chatbot revolution that we're seeing right now, normal ass people using chatbots to get information all the time, I think we're going to continue to see that change into the point where browsers are going to become that interface, the browser itself. This is something that has been really highlighted to me since moving to Dia as my full-time browser. Dia, their search bar is essentially a chat window. It's a chat window that you can ask about other tabs. It's a chat window that you can summarize multiple tabs. It's a chat window that you can go and get access or summarize YouTube videos or whatever, and it is deeply integrated into the browser. I think the next big shift in future UIs is going to be the UI of how we browse the web through a browser, and most likely what nobody's really doing right now, on the dang phone. Like, I gotta ask myself 100 times a day, why is Dia a web browser for the computer when most people are using chatbots on their phone and browsing the internet on their phone? Yeah. Where is the Dia on the phone that is doing those things that's taking that space? So if I had to imagine it, I would imagine future UIs are going to be pulling in UIs from the browser rather than you going out to a website. You're pulling in UIs that give you the stuff that you need. Now, I mean, who really knows about any of this stuff? But I do think that is going to be a shift, and that's going to be a massive bummer for those of us who like the creative web. And I think the creative web will still be there, but like general ass people, they're going to be utilizing their browser as essentially the window to pulling in information rather than having to go and visit sites.
I've been thinking about this question a lot. Like we saw it with newspapers, right? Like there's a lot of people who used to do really good research, and newspapers used to pay people really good money to be reporters. And as that space kind of phased out, we don't see it as much anymore. And now I think about that with the web as well, because like I write blog posts, I write content, I put a lot of content out there, and that content is, yes, it's consumed. We put a lot of content that's consumed by people, but a lot of it has been used to train these AIs and for people to just get a very quick answer. You can see the amount of like bots visiting websites is going up significantly, because you ask a question about JavaScript and it's like, well, let me just go suck in 40 pages of that, talk about using JavaScript const variables, and then just distill it down. And from a user point of view, I freaking love it. I don't want to spend half an hour reading through your life story about X, Y, and Z. I just want to get straight to the actual answer of what it is that I'm looking at. We saw it with Google Summaries as well. You Google something. How often do you like Google something and just read the summary and close the tab because you have your actual answer, right? So for those people who do it for money, where those businesses are going to be significantly disrupted.
Yes.
And then like what happens to people who rely on that money in order to put information out on the internet?
Right.
I don't I don't know, but it's a tricky thing, because I'll tell you, there's no shortage of people putting information on the internet right now. There's no shortage of people just sharing what they know. And will that stop at a certain point? I don't know. I hope it means the end of the like awful clickbait. Here are 14 things you must see in Italy when you visit, like all those like awful websites that have popped up over the last 5-10 years where it's just like garbage SEO content. I hope it means it's the end of that. But unfortunately, I also think it's going to be the end of people putting out very helpful information. You know who I want to get their thought on this?
Who?
And who I think that got I don't know if they got out in the right time. Chris Coyier. I'm curious his thoughts on this. He spent a good chunk of his life, his entire legacy is putting out very helpful information on web development on the web. And the CSS tricks was such a huge swath of information.
Changed my life.
So many people to learn. Absolutely life-changing. And he was only able to do that because he was able to make money on it as well. And imagine, like, is the next CSS tricks is not going to make that much money. He's not going to be able to dedicate those resources to it. So I'm very curious to hear what his thoughts are on creating and writing content and information and putting it out there when the upside to it is much smaller. It's just these AIs are going to gobble it up and short form it for our brain rotting people right now.
Yep. Yeah, I know it's all we're in a weird world.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad, and I think there are things that we have not yet figured out. I think that we will likely adapt and see how these things work. There will be some bad things, and there will probably be some good stuff that comes out of it as well.
And there'll probably be some things we don't see coming.
That's for sure. That's just a lot of
things work. Yeah.
And if you want to see all of the errors in your application, you'll want to check out Sentry at sentry.io/syntax. You don't want a production application out there that, well, you have no visibility into in case something is blowing up and you might not even know it. So head on over to sentry.io/syntax. Again, we've been using this tool for a long time and it totally rules. All right.
Jeff says, while developing, I want something that will navigate browser preview to the corresponding output file of the currently focused editor file I'm working in VS Code. I have searched the internet for 4 hours, and I was sure you had mentioned extension or something. I can't seem to do the one that it is. And then he goes on to explain it. Yes, I have this exact problem as well, and I built a solution for it. If you go to github.com/wesboss/hot-tips, and you look at my Vite config, when I start the Vite config, it just takes a listing of all of the files, and then it finds the most recently edited HTML file and will automatically open that up in the browser for you, because I'm sure you could take that and extend it to simply just show the one that I am currently working on right now, or some little browser shortcut. But that's the exact problem that I have of, I want to open the most recently edited file. And I also, similarly, I made another extension called Vite Directory Contents. I think you can just run npx viter and it will fire up just a regular Vite process, but it will also make a directory of all of your files, because in my tutorials, you can't tell people to directly type in the name of the HTML file that you want to go to. It's so much nicer when you can just see a list of files, click on the one you want, and then it renders out.
Yeah, it's tough too in a component-based flow, like how many times you're at the root page and how many times is that, like you have slugged pages or something like that, like where do you actually go in those instances? So there's so many times when that wouldn't work. It would like mostly just work in your specific use case
just
that you
HTML,
mentioned. So,
very simple.
yeah, it's one of those things that I think on the surface it seems like a good idea, but then when you get into the edges, you're like, oh, this actually wouldn't work at all.
The other way around as well is, when you're visiting a page, you often want to know, A, where is this content in the database? And B, if you're like using a CMS, and B, what components are currently on the page? Like, what do I need to edit to be able to do that? And some frameworks are better at that than others.
Yeah, totally. Word. All right, next question from Ben Jackson. I just had an idea for a website contact form that I don't think I've seen before, and I wondered what your thoughts on are. Normally, I would use an external service, possibly FormSpree, Resend, Netlify Forms, whatever, but I just had the thought that it could be done use a simple mailto anchor href for pre-filling the query string part of the href. So they had an href with a mailto and then a query string of subject with the form subject body and the body text inside of the query string. So basically, like, you're using mailto pre-populate a query string, and that's the thing. So obviously I've added mailto email links with the websites dozens of times, but I've never pre-filled the content of that email based on the contents of a form. Imagine a customer selects boxes, chooses options, but when you come to send the inquiry, it gets sent to your personal email as plain text, which each of your chosen options added to your email. I think that would be kind of neat. I don't think I've ever seen this functionality in the wild, so I feel like there must be some reasons not to do it. Here are the pros and cons. They list several different pros and cons. I'm going to say, without reading these out, mailto is not good enough, because if I click on something and it opens up my Apple Mail and I close it immediately and I never go to reach out to that person. A contact form in 2025 is essential for normies on the web. Even me, I'm a tech-ass person, and I would lose it if I had to do something in a mailto link like this. So I think it's a fun idea. I think at the end of the day, mailto, just not a 2025 experience, if you're asking me.
Yeah, regular people don't have their mailto configured properly. It just opens up Apple Mail or whatever the one is, and if they're not using that as their app, then how do they know how to do that? And the other thing is that companies often need to be able to rigidly enforce what people are sending them. So if you just give somebody like a list, like send me these 10 things, they're not going to send half of them, and then you got to email them back, and it's way too much support. The reason people have contact forms is so that they can very clearly specify what you should send them, and also they have many steps in front of that to try to solve their problem before the email actually reaches your inbox. So, and also I've done that, like the query string subject and body in the past, and it works fairly well, but I do know that there's lots of email clients that don't support it quite. So if whatever weird email client you're working in, it might not necessarily work. All right. Subgrid Mitchell says, do you feel there is an increasing pressure for developers to become full stack? As a senior front-end engineer, I'm seeing a troubling trend of full stack roles being advertised as front-end. It's been so demoralizing for me. I love the front-end creative side of things, but now I feel like I'm being asked to do more work for about the same pay. What is even a path to full stack if I did, or should I just leave the industry because what I really like is being creative, and now these employees seem like they devalue that. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Yes, I think the job of a web developer is just to get it done. It's always been so weird to me that people think that they can just say, I am just going to be doing CSS. Like that was the thing, is like there used to be people who only do CSS and don't touch JavaScript, or I'm only going to be touching the front end and all that back end stuff. That's somebody else's job, not my paycheck. I'm not getting paid enough to do that type of stuff. That makes absolutely no sense to me. You are trying to build experiences for the web, and you need to use whatever the hell you need to do to make that kind of thing. And you might be a little bit stressed out because your skills don't extend back, but the relationship between server and client is getting significantly blurred. Being able to use AI to build is allowing people to do stuff they not necessarily have been done before, whether that's a good or a bad thing. You should be able to do the full stack. That's not to say you shouldn't be able to focus on something if somebody necessarily needs that, but I do think that the future of building for the web is being a full stack developer where you're able to write some CSS, build UI, and it's not just creative, it's you're solving problems both on the server and on the client. And if that is a UI challenge that you need to build, absolutely. Or if that's a performance issue and saving to the database and queuing things up, then that's what you need to do as well.
It's interesting to me as somebody who came into this industry as an agency developer, and like we weren't called full stack developers, but I was writing PHP sites, I was writing CSS, I was doing the database. I was a full stack developer, Yeah. It was always weird to me that there were people who would just do just the CSS or just, because it just did not like, I was like, man, that would be crazy to focus on one thing.
Here's a question, a follow-up I have for you is, do you think we are going to see a wave of people like almost rage quitting because of things like this and because of the whole new generation of having to learn AI and having to integrate that? Do you think that there's going to be a lot of people being like, I cannot do this again? I just learned React over the last 5 years. I cannot deal with this whole new wave of web development.
I mean, maybe, but like, it's not something I could personally understand. As a person who works on the web, like, it's always been of my mind that my job is to understand how the web works, how the browser works, how everything fits together. You're never building a website. You're building all of you're building all the stuff. Even if I'm not touching the CSS, which is never the case for me, I still need to understand the structure that makes the most amount of sense. I still need to understand how JavaScript APIs integrate with CSS or HTML APIs. I need to understand big picture. And so like, I would have a hard time at this point being like, that not being my responsibility. That's always been my responsibility. Even if I'm not writing the CSS, it's always been my responsibility to understand how this all works together. That's just how I've always seen it. Yeah.
You see the same thing in other like creative industries as well with like video editors, like producer Randy is a video producer, but like he also knows a hell of a lot about audio, and he knows a hell of a lot about YouTube thumbnails, and he knows a lot of like he writes some code if he needs to, if that's what he needs to do to solve his problems, he'll go and write some code. And it's not like he's gonna sit there and be like, I'm only an audio guy, I don't do video, or that's not above my pay grade, that type of thing. And those people, you see that all the time. I'm sure this happens in the trades as well, not my job, not going to worry about that. I'm focused on this one thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I it's a weird mentality for me to get behind, the it's not my job thing. Your job is to build great experiences on the web, and you should know how it all works together. And if that means you're doing it with AI, if that means you're doing it with this or that, if you're using new CSS APIs, it's like the people who are like, I'm sticking to my floats or whatever. I don't need to learn all this new fancy CSS stuff. I mean, it's like there's going to be people who say that about absolutely everything. Their mentality was, I learned it once, I don't need to learn it again. This was never the right career path for you if that's the case.
Can I tell you a story that I often bring up to people when I encounter this? Is when I got the very first iPod in high school, I freaking loaded that thing up with like however many songs you could put on it, a couple hundred.
Which was your first iPod?
My first iPod was, I think, the second one. Let me look.
The first one had clicky buttons. Mine had a glass front, which was all capacitive buttons. And then the next big one had like a gray circle where you actually pushed on it. So my first one was the all glass front with the red glow underneath the buttons.
That was mine as well. Yeah, where it had the capacitive buttons up top.
Yes.
So I brought that thing on the bus the next day, and I was so stoked because everyone had Discmans, and I was bringing
no one had an
Discman
iPod
on.
at that era. Yeah.
No, I was the very first person to have an iPod, and I showed all of my friends. I'm like, holy crap, look at this. I got a whole book of CDs on here, like a whole binder.
You can play Breakout on it.
And my one friend on the bus goes, I just don't see why you'd want that. And like, that's it.
Brother.
We're done. The CD is the best we're gonna do. You
got 12 songs
piece
and that's
of
it.
Shiny plastic with 12 songs on it. That's the end. We're there. Like you cannot fathom anything past that. And you think that this iPod is stupid, and that bugged me so much because just like there's some people out there where they're just like, that's it. I'm happy with that. And I'm kind of jealous of those people as well. I'm jealous of people who can drink Folgers coffee and think it's good. You know?
Dude.
It's just simple.
I lament this all the
life.
time. Yes, I wish I could leave the simple life many times, but no.
But man.
Yeah. Yeah, we had, I don't know which, it's either, I think it might be the third generation was the one that we both first had. The first time I ever saw one was the second generation, which was a big chunky guy, and it had clicky buttons, and a kid in my school had it, and I was just like, what is this? And it probably had like 15 or 20 gigs. My first one had 40 gigs, I think. I don't remember, somewhere around there. And I didn't get another one until they had color screen. So I had that thing forever in college and stuff. It didn't have a backlight even. So it was, ancient. But that was game-changing for me.
Third generation is what it was. And then that was before we had the color version. By the way, remember people used to call the iPod Touch the iTouch?
I hated it. Yeah, what?
People that do...
Because that was not the name of the darn thing.
It's not the name. No, that's not it. And producer Randy just had a TikTok about like things that drive him nuts, about people that have the spoon upside down and like, like from. And I was like, that bugs me. But like the one thing that kills me, and I still get mad about it, is when people called it an iTouch. And it's like it's not an iTouch. It was an iPod Touch.
Yeah, that's weird.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Next question. What do we got?
Next question. Yes, from Joe Young. I added Mighty here because there's a movie, Mighty Joe Young, about a gorilla, and I thought that was funny. So Mighty Joe Young, long-time listener, first-time caller. Do you have any recommendations on what pre-commit checks to run and how? Aside from the general pre-commit practice of just looking over my code thoroughly and letting the editor flag any errors, I'm not sure of the most efficient way to automate the process a bit more. I tried things like Husky or writing manual hooks for things like linting, and I just get into a tangled web of ESLint errors. That's if I even pass what feels like a large, difficult hurdle of getting these things set up correctly. It feels like such an annoying task. I don't think pre-commit checks should be limited to linting. I'm just not sure if there are other best practices or things to check for, but I want to be better at my area of development. Also, the stickers from the newsletter totally rule. Thank you, Joe. Pre-commit hooks, for me personally, have always seemed like too much effort because, like you mentioned, it always kind of is a pain to set up. And what I ultimately end up doing personally is having a process where I'm running checks as a part of my development process, and then I'm running checks in my PR and code review process. So the only time I get into pre-commit stuff is if I'm working in packages that need to get published and things like that. It's creating a new version of the package, et cetera, et cetera. But Yeah, that's it for me. I don't know if it's ultimately worth it. It depends on what you and your team decide. Wes,
Yeah.
you look like you might have some thoughts here, but
I haven't used a pre-commit hook in a long time. I used to have them set up for linting, for formatting,
yeah,
type checking, all of those types of things. And a lot of those things have now moved to GitHub Actions, where
right.
they just
Yeah.
happen asynchronously. And you just throw like a commit in there. Like let the GitHub action format the code if it's not correct, or throw up a linting error. If the person didn't run the linter before they put their commit in, and then now they have a pull request in, then you can just fail the pull request against that. So I agree. They've always just been more of a pain in the butt, especially when you're trying to get like third party contributors. So I'm not a huge fan of them. Maybe for things like bumping the version. That's one thing that like version bump, release,
I
cut a
still
new
do that as a
release.
GitHub action.
Yeah,
I almost always read it just because it's the tool I know, you know?
yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, most of my stuff has moved over to GitHub Action, and then things that must happen, I just kind of remembered to do them before I send in the pull request, or run it after when I realize my PR has been failed.
Yeah, if you're out there and you're using pre-commit hooks for something that are essential and that like is the best way to do that, let us know because I'm curious.
Matt says, "Hi guys, I've recently come into a code base for an app which was poorly built by a single outsourced developer. The backend is PHP, and one example of its problems is the changes are literally copy pasted from the dev's machine to the running server to update it, meaning we're making updates at 3 a.m. to prevent interrupted." Oh my gosh. This, along with other issues, means that changes are difficult, downtime is common, and the whole thing feels ready to be collapsed. I want to migrate to something like Firebase so we don't have to worry about all of these things, but the app has grown to a few thousand active users very quickly. Do you have any advice for migrating at that scale without impacting users too much? Or would you just grit your teeth and make the existing server work? Man, I think there's so much you can
Yeah.
do in between copy pasting your changes at 3 a.m. and like migrating the entire thing to a different language and putting it on Firebase. Is people write good code in PHP. Surprisingly, there's lots of PHP code out there, and I would very first just implement some sort of version control and some sort of release strategy. That at the
Something,
very
yes.
basic is gonna get you there, and that might mean you have to buckle down and write a whole bunch of PHP, but I would think so. Or if you really wanted to re-implement it, you just have to write like a script that will migrate the entire database, and then you can build the entire app, and then you'll have to rerun that script again before
Yep.
you actually cut over to this new thing and make sure that all of the features are still working.
I'm the type of person who always looks at these things optimistically first and foremost, and like I've had to get better with that with age. So like when I see this, the first thing I think of is a certain part of me would think just how nonchalantly it would be easy to migrate something like this. I don't suggest you don't migrate it because migrations have worked out well for me in the past. They've also become a giant headache. But I do think what you need to do is take a very, very, very deep, realistic view at what all exists and what could be the massive pitfalls. Because I think oftentimes we gloss over the things that are going to be big challenges and just assume that they are just challenges. So just take a firm look at what really would be the lift for this before you make a decision. Because, at the end of the day, a migration could be a great decision. Not saying that it couldn't be, but like, just know. Yeah, just know.
The thing about moving from one language to another is a lot of the logic will still stay the same.
Yeah.
And like we talked to the folks from TypeScript when they ported it to Go, they literally just went function by function and transferred it over to Go. So it really depends on how big this actual code base is and how much you can do there. But yeah, it's not crazy, Like maybe you can just say like, hey, boss, give me 3 days and let me see how far I can get in 3 days. And like if
Yes.
then you can kind of like look up and be like, all right, this seems doable. You know, here's a couple hard parts, and here's how we're gonna approach this. But or you might come out of that being like, you know what, this thing is a monster, and it's not worth moving it over to something entirely different.
Word.
Last question from CJM. Hi, Wes and Scott, and maybe CJ. Nope, not today. What GitHub Copilot features do you recommend disabling while you're learning something new? Thanks for the awesome show. Ooh, this is a good question. Do you have anything that you disable when learning something new?
If I'm learning something new, I typically disable the autocomplete, because the autocomplete can make choices that are not correct sometimes, and that can actively harm you. And I'm thinking like you're working with a new library, or the library is like a newer version. It can be giving you older code sometimes. It can be giving you wrong version of code. It can be throwing a bunch of Tailwind classes in there for no reason. Like there's a lot of stuff that can come along with the autocomplete, and it's so overly hyperactive sometimes that you're like, all right. And I've largely kind of moved away from using the autocomplete at all, really. The times that it helps out the most is when you need to do a lot of like repetitive work, and it can like save you on repetitive work. But when I'm learning, I don't want that around at all, because I'm not doing repetitive work. I'm doing deeper work.
I find that I disable the like tab completions and
Yes.
the inline suggestions a lot. Not necessarily when it's something new, but when it is something complex that I really need to think about, because it will try to be like, hey, how about that? Like, just wait a sec. Let me think about this for just a second while I'm doing it, and I just have to turn it off because it requires. It's not like a mindless. Yeah, I have to put a div and 4 buttons on the page, and yeah, we can do that. But it's just like, let me really think about how I should be structuring this type of thing, and if it tries to like get in there, I'm just like, no, you sit on the sidelines for a bit while I give this one a good think.
Well, I think that's about it for our potluck questions today. If you have a question for us over at Syntax, head on over to syntax.fm, and there's a form in the top navigation about asking some potluck questions, and we answer these at least once a month, and we try to make sure that we get some good answers for you. So now's the part of the show where we talk about sick picks and shameless plugs. A sick pick is anything that we have been enjoying lately. Is it anything that just rips for us, stuff that we enjoy? I have a sick pick for you, and I actually do not remember if I've sick picked this, so you'll have to tell me if I have. I got something that I use way more than I thought I would ever use it. I got an air duster.
Yes, I don't know if you have or not, but I'm very, very into air duster TikTok right now, so tell me about it.
Okay, so I was not planning on spending this much on an air duster, because this one is expensive, which is ridiculous. But I watched, what's the guy who does all the tests? Project Farm.
Yeah,
I watched the Project
they're
Farm.
Not all built the same.
They're not all built the same, and the Project Farm video convinced me that getting a nicer air duster was the way to go. This thing, I use it everywhere. I use it in my car. I can use this, I kid you not, as a leaf blower for my patio. I have a leaf blower, but like we have a patio set that gets leaves on it because we got a big old tree. If we're going to go out and watch a movie, I'm not going to go get the leaf blower. I just got the little air duster, blow off the leaves. I use this on my desk, computer, everywhere. This thing absolutely rips. It is the fastest darn little air duster on the planet, and I just adore it. I thought, I was like, yeah, I'll use it. I could use an air duster for, cleaning off my desk, which is why I got it, or my computer, or just the general air duster task, because I didn't want the little, spray things in the house. They're just like, disposable, whatever. Rather get something permanent. And boy, howdy, this thing rules. I use it all the time.
I really want to get one of those, especially for like around the barbecue, and you do it right now. Do your hair. I want to see it. Nuts.
Here, I'm holding it way out here.
Oh my gosh. You know why we're starting to see these air dusters absolutely everywhere? I'm a little bit of manufacturing history for you. China has reverse engineered the Dyson motor.
That's
You can go on AliExpress and for like $15 you can buy like a wicked little motor that spins incredibly fast for like dirt cheap. And it's really interesting now that like because when Dyson put out that that hair dryer that everyone has now, they have the air wrap and they have all these like really neat hair product accessories they made, and now they actually have like a really cool stick vacuum that's the
I was gonna say, have you seen the
well.
stick vacuum? Yeah, the stick vacuum is
and
crazy.
they're all using this motor that Dyson developed, and it's actually a very interesting motor, which is people give Dyson a lot of flack these days because their batteries die forever and they feel like they haven't innovated, but I'm pretty sure they made that motor, but now it's been duped over and over again, and you can pick one up for $15 on AliExpress, and now you're seeing all these crazy products that have these insane motors in them.
Yeah, it's wild, and some of these actually do function as little vacuums too, but I never found one with great reviews, so it just like wasn't a feature that I needed.
Oh yeah, you're more of a blower, not a. Maybe we should cut that out. I'm not even gonna continue.
We don't have to cut that out, but you don't have to continue that. Yes.
Okay.
That's hilarious.
I'll stop right there. Awesome.
Yeah.
I really want to get one of those. The only thing I'm concerned about is like if you buy a cheap one that's not well reviewed, they have like they use a lot of battery very quickly, and if you discharge a battery too quickly, they can kind of get explodey.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah,
you're not like me buying sketchy ones, so that's good.
Yeah, there are some things I'll sketch out on, but the air duster, for some reason, I felt like I needed to go
is not
premium
you
with
should
it.
ever sketch out on. No.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stick pick kettlebell. I just got a new kettlebell, which I previously just had like the cast iron ones. Like weight is weight. It's like the most primitive thing ever. Throwing it around, and I realized there's these things called competition kettlebells, which they look much nicer, and B, they're all exactly the same size no matter how heavy they are. So I got a couple of these competition kettlebells, and they are really, really nice, both just in your hand. They're obviously all the same size, so as you go up and down the different weights, you're not like adjusting for different size of kettlebells. So I'm a big fan of it. I'll link up the one I got, but generally you just search competition kettlebell and you find one with like a stainless handle, and they are very nice to use. So I've been pretty happy with mine.
Nice. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a kettlebell that I use mostly for stretching. It's big old heavy. I put it on my whole. I do like this, and then I'll sit in the splits and do like a good morning on it.
Oh,
and yes,
that's a good.
Big fan
I
of
should
that.
Try that. How heavy is the one that you got that you used?
Maybe
for
like
that?
35 or something. It's
Oh,
heavy
yeah.
enough to pull me down.
That's a big boy.
Yeah.
Mine is. Oh yeah, mine's 35. 16
Okay.
kilograms. Is it yellow?
No, it's black. It's one of the big old, just classic kettlebells.
Oh, yeah.
My buddy who you met on the show, Eric Sartorius, when he lived in Denver, he like moves places and he'll buy some like gym equipment and be like, when he needs to move, he can't like transport it because he's moving out of the country or something. So
Yeah.
he was like moving to Germany or something, and he was like, "Hey, I can't take this kettlebell." And he's like, "I'll sell it to you for cheap." I'm like, "All right, I'll take a kettlebell."
That's sick. Cool. All right. Thanks everybody so much for tuning in, and we will catch you later. Peace.